the torches. Some will actually plug direct into the USB if you take the end off, and others have a little cable to do it. I don't think there's any with batteries in them. Occasionally you get what comes up, and there's a little AAA battery in there, but most of them are just rechargeable ones. And I find if you just use them for the light therapy, they last for months without a recharge. But they will gradually, reduce the luminosity rather than just suddenly switch off. So you'll get to now, I think, time to recharge. You right? Okay, so let's have a look at how the immune system operates, just very, very briefly, in view of the approaching epidemic. So classification of our immune system cells basically are divided into two functions, two parts. We have an inborn innate immune system. This is composed mostly of our white cells, the majority being the neutrophils, and the eosinophils and the monocytes. And the innate system comes in immediately. We recognize, the immune system recognizes there's a foreigner in there. And that foreigner could be a bacteria or it could be a virus. A bacteria is a living entity. If you're a strict vegetarian and you stand on a bacteria, you could kill it. Okay, so you may feel bad about that. If you tread on a virus, you cannot kill it. It's not living. Okay? This idea that you can kill a virus is just rubbish, because it's not living. It's a chemical. It's a string of DNA, and in cases it's a string of RNA, which you can destroy with heat and with antiseptics, etc. And the immune system destroys them by spraying them with reactive oxygen species, or free radicals. So each of these cells produces a range of different free radicals. Neutrophils produce hypochlorite, which is basically household bleach. So household bleach will in fact kill 65% of all known germs, if you like. Hydrogen peroxide, which is produced by the eosinophils, is a highly oxidizing bleaching agent. And as far as the monocytes here are concerned, and the macrophages, it's nitric oxide which does the killing, is the reactive oxygen species. So this is what happens in the first day or two having had the infection. If the system fails and it doesn't eradicate the bug, and the bug, or in this case maybe the virus or the foreigner, survives the spraying or is not recognized, we then switch to the adaptive immune system, known as phase 2. And the adaptive immune system involves making antibodies. And those antibodies will attack, they'll attach to the virus and the bacteria, and the white cells will then attack because they know what to attack to. But unfortunately, it often attacks other cells in the process. So up goes your antibody level, and you may become hypersensitive and develop allergies and all sorts of other problems. So it's better to kill in the first pathway with the innate immune system. But if that doesn't work, and the adaptive, which takes much longer to come into fruition, maybe 4 or 5 days, and is mainly mediated by the thymus and the spleen gland. And then you will produce antibodies, and then the advantage of that is you'll probably have immunity for life. Okay? So the question with the coronavirus is it's probably better to get it. To get it and to get over it, than to not get it, go and hide away and then come out and get it. If you get my meaning. It's like the so-called mumps epidemic and then the measles. When I was a child, my parents took us to measles parties. They couldn't believe, you go to a party because there's a kid down the road and you're lucky because that kid's got measles and everybody goes down there to get the measles. Because they know you're going to have a few days off school, you're going to itch, a bit of calamine lotion and get over it. And then you've got immunity for life. Okay? So in many ways, what we want to do is to optimize our immune system. And that means bringing it up to what it should be. We can't increase our immune system beyond that. We can't have a super immune system. What we can do is to get it back to what it should be with the full gene expression. So the question is, how do we do that? And here we see the two pathways of reactive oxygen species, or producing the free radicals. This one, hydrogen peroxide, and then going on with myeloperoxidase, as we'll see, mainly kills gram-positive bacteria and certain viruses like herpes, etc. But the alternative is the reactive nitrogen species here, which are derived from arginine, the amino acid here, by the process called the immune system here of the inducible nitric oxide synthase that produces nitric oxide. And that in turn can combine with superoxide and make peroxynitrate in really difficult cases. So if we look in and add in here what they do, these hypochlorites or bleach kill bacteria, mainly gram-positives and viruses, whereas the killing of the gram-negative bacteria, which are the more pathological ones, and viruses and certainly fungi, are by the nitric oxide. Now it's our opinion and our view that the coronavirus is killed in this mechanism with nitric oxide rather than hypochlorite. We don't know because, of course, we haven't got samples of anybody who's actually had coronavirus yet. I'm sure somebody will manage to obtain one day, but I'm pretty sure at the moment that it's this pathway which normally kills gram-negatives, which is why it's being particularly stubborn. So how do we increase this? There's 4 things we recommend, and these test up almost with every single person. One is citrulline. Citrulline is an amino acid, which, as you'll see here, is partly the recycling of arginine. So when arginine gives off its nitric oxide, it forms citrulline, which then recycles back due to NADPH back to arginine. Now the advantage of citrulline, it doesn't give the flush, and it also doesn't feed the herpes simplex virus. Okay? Whereas arginine does. Arginine helps this herpes simplex. So people who've got a little prone to herpes simplex shouldn't really take arginine, but citrulline is perfectly all right. So citrulline will recycle back to arginine and produce the nitric oxide. So you could call it like a non-flush arginine. So that's an important part of this pathway is citrulline. And we recommend about 1 gram as a dose. So you would normally obtain this from the various different types of foods. But 2 capsules, 2 500 milligrams, will make 1 gram. Now, without a shadow of doubt, as we'll learn, vitamin C. Vitamin C works in so many different pathways, antioxidants. It's a boost to the immune system. Everybody knows that ever since Lionel Pauling's work on increasing macrophage activity by using vitamin C. We reckon, again, somewhere between 1 gram and 1.5 grams, which in our particular capsules are 600 milligrams, so a couple of those at a time would be good once a day. So vitamin C for sure. Zinc. Zinc comes up with all tissue repair, but its main function of zinc is DNA repair. When DNA has suffered oxidative damage, it repairs the tissue. So it's important for the repair and for the activation of the immune system. And lastly, but no means least, is vitamin D. And vitamin D, as we talked about, or Gill talked about this morning, is really very important for the immune system. It actually attaches, the fat-soluble vitamins attach to the receptors of the nucleus. They work differently from the water-soluble vitamins, and they actually activate the immune system. And to date, there's over 90 different enzymes that have been identified which are vitamin D dependent. Okay, not just to do with calcium, but to do with the immune system. So it actually is the activator, it's the key into the immune system, particularly the lymphocytes, to switch them on. Now some bugs are very clever, they can antidote vitamin D. Lyme's disease is one of these. So it can actually activate the activation of vitamin D, so the vitamin D can't lock onto the receptor to work. So we find the vitamin D, the best form of vitamin D for us, we find is as a liposome, because it goes straight through the skin. You don't have to worry about getting it in there and absorbing it. And it's the same with this coronavirus. There's people who've got it and they don't know they've got it. They have no symptoms at all. Their immune system fights it off just like that. Okay. Other people get a bit of a sore throat, and then that's it. And other people get laid up like a dose of flu, and so on. What you want is to optimize your immune system, isn't it? We can't say, oh, I'm going to take so much zinc I'll never get it. What you want to do is to optimize your immune system so you don't get it. Okay? So those 4 are the things that consistently show up are the best for that particular virus. But it doesn't mean it would be the same for all viruses, okay? Because some viruses, like the influenza, may be killed by the gram-positive. But this is the best one for the gram-negatives. Okay, so we talked about the week. Orthomolecular psychiatry, we did a definition of terms. Depression, manic, psychosis. We talked about the history. That, by the way, is Jeff Bland on the top there, who, if you're interested in functional medicine update, you can go to his website on that functional medicine website and again download a lot of what were the CDs. And this is where I took this from one of his monthly recordings that he does, or did. Then we looked at the names for some of the pharmaceuticals, and then we left it there. So what I want you to try and understand is two things. One is that we can have emotional problems. You know, we have an upset at work, we have an upset with a personal situation, maybe we lose our job, maybe we're short of money. That's an upset, isn't it? That's enough to start off an anxiety. Maybe we go outside and heaven forbid someone's hit your car. It's an event, isn't it? And as you said about, Jill said about Eckhart Tolle, it's your perception of it, isn't it? Now, if someone had hit Jill's car, because Jill drove this time, I was smart not to drive. Someone hits her car, how would you react, Jill? Especially when you go out there and there's no notice saying, sorry.
Would I be angry? Probably.
Would you be angry?
I
can see the anger coming out already. Okay. Right. I'd be a little bit upset for her, obviously. You know, I'd feel sorry for her. Another person would feel their pride had been dented. You know, they'd saved up a lot of money for that car and someone's hit it and so on. So the same event can be perceived in different ways by different people. Okay, so stress at work could make one person angry, could make another person anxiety, and then fearful with their jobs and all sorts of things. So it's how we perceive the same event. The event is always the same, and Eckhart Tolle always says that the event is neutral. It's your perception of the event, which then changes your neurotransmitters. In other words, the mental changes are due to the changes of the chemistry, which is what Jill talks about. So in Steve's case, up went the histamine, down went the serotonin. That's his seesaw. And what we found is that zinc did this, got him back into balance. There may be other things that he needs in addition, but we know that zinc is one of the best things for you. Certainly it calibrates very highly because all the muscles tested strong. Now, if your neurotransmitters are really run the nervous system communication is very fast. If the first time Jill goes back to the car and she sees this dent, okay, it's going to go, that's noradrenaline is going to hit in through the sympathetic nervous system, wham, like that. And then I've got to sit next to her all the way home. And by that time, the adrenals have said, all right, you're thrashing us now, I'll stay thrashed. And up goes her adrenaline level through the adrenal medulla, and then that stays high. And as she gets home, we sorted out with the insurance company, etc., but she's still fuming. And then she wakes up during the night fuming, you know, or can't sleep, and then tomorrow the same thing and so on, because she set the hormones. So our hormones are for long-term adaptation to stress. The neurons are for quick reactions, to get you across the road if something happens. Right? Do you understand that? Okay, so immediately, for an imbalance in a stressful situation to the event, you get a change in the brain chemicals. And that's what we can very conveniently measure with the beginning and ending points, or the colours that we prefer because it's easier to use, the yin and the yang acetates. Then, when that stays for a while, the body, through the pituitary, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, will then change the hormones. So our adrenal stress hormones will go up, and the medulla is for relatively quick ones, and then the cortex with cortisone and the sex hormones and aldosterone will follow suit after a bit of time. So a person in a chronic state of stress, let's say, will have a high level of adrenaline and noradrenaline. But interestingly, as we'll see, there are times when noradrenaline doesn't actually muscle test, nor does adrenaline, but the person is in a stress state. And this is because they're basically not breaking the adrenaline down, not because they're even thinking about the problem. They've long forgotten why they got stressed, but they're unable to metabolize or break down the adrenaline, and so the adrenaline level, or one of the metabolites of adrenaline, remains high, and it's switching the person on to an ongoing stress state, which is probably most of us to some extent. So event, how you perceive the event, the mental changes which alter the neurotransmitters, the change which gives you also the feeling, the feeling of the problem, and that anger that Jill's giving out now. That real feeling is changing her. It's making her blood vessels. She's getting hot, she's sweating, she's getting red. You can see the anger coming out of somebody. It's because of the high level of the noradrenaline. And then she develops the physical symptoms due to the change. So her noradrenaline level's gone up, and let's say her serotonin has gone down. You talked about when your team wins, you get a dopamine surge, and when your team loses, you get a serotonin drop. I know that because I support Southampton. So we get mostly the low serotonin then. So physical symptoms due to the muscle meridian imbalance. So the meridian imbalance is due to the neurotransmitters, or vice versa. The neurotransmitters are the meridians. The meridians are the neurotransmitters. Okay? So think back to Steve. Every time you could do a patient, think of Steve. High serotonin, low serotonin, high histamine was the balance there. Therefore, we found the muscles associated with that were all the spleen muscles, which was the lats and the trapezius and the triceps, and all the perineal muscles were weak, and the tibialis posterior. So that's the pattern. Now, he could be a runner. Are you a runner? Used to be, but no, I said, are you a runner? Used to be, okay. He's a walking time bomb, or running time bomb, okay? If you lose the power of your perineal muscles, you're going to get an inversion strain very easily, because you're not going to bring the foot back into eversion. Okay? So it can go over just like that, because there's no support to the ankle. So if you hit a stone, or on the edge of a curb, he could go over, just like that. Now, one of the things I found interesting when we learned how to do the light like that and to display all the muscles is that tibialis anterior muscle is not a bladder muscle. I haven't found one person where it is. In the older books of AK, and tibialis anterior was considered to be a bladder muscle and not an adrenal or circulation sex. But I haven't found a single person when I switched on who's actually shown to a bladder. So that's why I do tibialis posterior with you, and peroneus longus and peroneus tertius. Okay, so physical symptoms would be due to the changes within the meridians, the neurotransmitter, and therefore reflecting in the muscle patterns. So the muscle pattern weakness then means you've got an imbalance in the prime movers and the antagonists, which then move the bones out of position. Then you get your malfunction with your mechanical problems. So most mechanical problems, unless there's a trauma, are due to imbalances in the muscles, which is what Dr. Goodard taught us 30 years ago. Okay. So this, I'm just going to present this as a problem to you, and then we'll explain it during the rest of the day. This man is a chiropractor, aged 51 years, 2 children, married. Symptoms: insomnia, apparently high cortisol, a lot of stress at work. Okay, familiar story. Okay, middle-aged person, good job, probably high income, but high expenses, have to work hard to just make ends meet and things. Body type is a green person. That means they're tall. It means they live on their adrenal glands. So green body type people tend to run on their adrenal glands. When I tested him, he showed to high protoporphinogen, which is a porphyrin compound on the way of making heme and hemoglobin. So that means he's got hypoxia, so he's got lack of oxygen in the system, which is deadly for a lot of conditions. He has high adrenochrome, which is one of the little markers you've been given out just now, and we'll see this is a derivative of adrenaline. He has a gene expression, knows how much he's using his genes at the moment, of just 35%. And he was positive to needing liposomal vitamin D at 40 drops. That's 40,000 international units. Now, I can't say much more about the guy, but he lives in the northern part of the country. So I probably don't need to say anything more, because they don't get the sunshine in the same way, the hours of sunshine, okay? And that's why the vitamin D was so high. But he may only need the vitamin D at that level for perhaps 1-2 weeks. You have to test that. And then usually the dose builds up, and you can then halve the dose. But he needs a big amount. Now, his adrenaline is produced due to his lifestyle. He's a hard worker in every way. So he has a lifestyle which is Go, 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 typical chiropractors and osteopaths and practitioners. Okay. Adrenaline, so his adrenaline level would be high. He becomes oxidized. The adrenaline, as we'll see in a minute, becomes oxidized and converts to adrenochrome, which maintains the high stress levels. So he's running on a derivative, an oxidized derivative of adrenaline, which is very, very difficult to metabolize from the body. So once you switch into this and you can't get rid of adrenaline and it shunts it to adrenochrome, as we'll see, you're in a permanent stress situation, which is what happens to our patients. They can't sleep properly and they feel agitated all the time. Oxidation of the adrenaline occurs due to an oxidating chemical somewhere inside. There's something oxidizing his adrenaline. Instead of getting it out in the pathway that Gill showed, it's something is failing to let that metabolize and is oxidizing the adrenaline before it gets metabolized in the same way. In other words, there's free radicals being produced in the body endogenously. It's not because he's eating chips that he's getting free radicals. There's some oxidative reaction. And that was the question. What was it with John doing this? It was found to be sulfite, which is normally oxidized by sulfate oxidase, the enzyme. You probably all had sulfite toxicity at some time. You all drink red wine and beer, okay? If you are one of these people who drink spirits and you feel great, and you drink a glass or two of wine or beer and you feel headachy or tired or in the morning, hands up those people, be honest, stick your hands up because it's most of you. I don't care what you say. The rest of some of you say, well, it doesn't hurt me because I don't drink, I can't tolerate it, you see. And that's it, because you don't drink the alcohol or drink the beer or the wine because you can't take the sulfites. Sulfites are naturally present in grapes, okay? There's no such thing as a sulfate-free wine. You cannot get a sulfate-free wine. You can get one which has no added sulfites because sulfites are naturally in the grapes. They're in a known range of sort of compounds, and that includes the worst ones are dried fruits. Dried fruits are extremely high in sulfites naturally because they're concentrated in there. Sulfite it has to be converted by sulfate oxidase to sulfate. So sulfite is SO3. And we need to oxidize that to SO4, which then the body can use in the normal pathway. Sulfite creates headaches, it creates wheezing of the chest, asthmas, and all sorts of things. There's a very simple remedy to this, and that's hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide converts sulfite to sulfate with the remnants, the remainder is water, H2O. So it converts sulfite into sulfate with the byproduct of water. Okay? And that's why we produce, can you show them the sulfite oxidase, sulfite clear we call it, essential, 5 mil of hydrogen peroxide, 3% food grade hydrogen peroxide, 1 drop in a glass of wine and you won't get a headache. Okay? 6 drops in a bottle of wine and 4 drops in a pint of beer. Okay, that's the order of the day. You can rush and get that when we have the break. Okay? We sell this by the hundreds, I can tell you, particularly to the Irish. They love it, and the Americans. It's really very, very popular. Fine, on average, it's 1 drop. You can muscle test, and obviously, as we found, there are some wines which have higher sulfates, either naturally or for shipping purposes. If you have wine, in France and Italy, sometimes it can be quite cheap stuff, but you don't get a headache. And then you buy the same one in this country, in the supermarket in this country, and you get a headache. And you think, I wish I'd never touched the stuff. They add sulfites to stop the fermentation so that the wine can travel. All right, and this is why the difference. If you get local wine where you go, in France or Italy or anywhere else, it's fine because they don't add sulfites. But the French and the Italians and the Spanish add sulfites in order to preserve and stop the fermentation so the wine travels. So in John's case, sulfite oxidase was inhibited. So using monoamine oxidase instead of clogging up the porphyrinogen oxidase pathway. So in other words, the sulfite was occupying all his oxidizing enzymes. He was saying, well, I haven't got enough sulfite oxidase, so let's use some other ones, which is why he was then not able to convert his protoporphyrins, as we see, into heme. Inhibition of the monoamine oxidase enzyme, which breaks down adrenaline, normally oxidizes adrenaline through, as Gill said, methylation and conjugation. Guilty trigger, sulfates in wine, beers and dried fruit. Simple. Okay. supply him with 36 bottles of sulfite clear is the answer, and then he can go and drink what he wants. Okay, so in other words, because he's a beer and wine drinker, it's actually having a detrimental effect on his and creating this oxidative stress that he's not able to make all the compounds that he should, which is stopping him from sleeping and creating high cortisol level. Now he needs the vitamin D, and we don't know at this stage, maybe sulfide oxidase is also inhibited by low levels of vitamin D. We see that there's over, as I say, 90, and some are saying much higher than that, enzymes that are switched on by vitamin D. So forget the fact it's just something had to do with blood calcium. There's a lot more to do with the whole immune system and the hormonal system.